Hello and welcome to another episode of Adulting with Hannah. I'm Hannah, here today to continue my astrology murderer series. I still don't have a name for it. Okay, so if you missed the first episode, we talked about Taurus serial killers. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about Cancer serial killers. And if you're wondering, what kind of order are you going in, Hannah? The answer is, according to a Wikipedia article about known serial killers by zodiac sign, the least number of serial killers was Taurus with 22. The next in line is Cancer, and we make a big jump up to 34 serial killers in the Cancer zodiac. So let's talk about them. First up on the list is Donato Bianca. That's not right. Balancia? I don't know, I'm sorry. I'm gonna mispronounce names and cities wrong. It's just gonna happen. I tried looking up videos of people saying it, and people say names a bunch of different ways, and I got frustrated, so I'm just gonna go with my first gut instinct. Donato was born July 10th, 1951 in Italy, and he is known for killing 17 people. 9 of them were women and 8 of them were men, which is interesting. Most serial killers kill either one or the other gender, but this was a pretty much even mix of both. The other weird thing about Donato is that his MO was very all over the place, and so that made it really hard to connect him to all of these murders. These murders were all committed within like a year of each other, October 1997 to August 1998, which honestly, like, when I hear about serial killers and there's a lot of murders, it's like, wow, that's a lot of people. But then you're like, well, maybe they killed these people over the course of like 10 years. No, this literally was within a year. He killed almost 20 people. Like, wow. He did exhibit some of the signs that we now know are signs of somebody who might grow up to be a serial killer, including like bedwetting to a later age. And his mother would actually react to his bedwetting by putting his mattress on the balcony to embarrass him in front of the entire neighborhood. His aunt would also shame him by forcing him to strip naked and show his underdeveloped genitals to his cousins, which is really messed up. He started committing crimes when he was young, mostly like theft, robbery. He stole a motor scooter, things like that. But he actually didn't start murdering people until he was 47, as far as we know. But again, like, his MO was all over the place, and he killed men, women, all different types of people, so who knows. His first 2 crimes were actually related to his gambling addiction. So at one point, a friend of his lured him to a rigged gambling deal. The gambling situation, I don't know how it worked. Basically, like, it was rigged so that Donato would pay all this money and then he would be set up to lose. And I think he lost like almost $230,000, which is a lot of money. So he killed the guy that led him to this rigged gambling deal. After that, he killed the guy who was running the game, the gambling, the poker, I don't know what it was, the gambling thing. He killed the guy that was running it, and then he killed his wife, that guy's wife. So then it seems like he started killing to get money. So he killed a guy that was running like a money exchange, exchanging currencies or whatever, and robbed him. And then he killed the security guard that was there when he killed the money exchange guy. And then he killed 2 sex workers, so that one was just kind of like, why? And then he killed another guy that does money exchange, robbed him. And then a few months after that, and then a few months later, he killed a security guard who interrupted his interaction with a sex worker, and then he shot the sex worker as well. So things were getting really out of control. The sex worker actually survived in this case and was able to like identify him and testify against him. So like, good going, girl. You caught a crazy guy. So this sex worker that he shot survived, so she would play a big part in his arrest, but he did commit some more crimes before he was arrested. On 2 occasions, he killed women on trains by following them into the bathroom. So he killed 2 women that way. And then he also killed a gas station attendant in April of 1998. So then police start following him around because they think it's him, but they need proof. So they start following him around, and they end up collecting evidence from DNA evidence from things he threw away, like I think like a coffee cup and cigarettes or something, and they were able to tie him to it. So then he was arrested in May of 1998, and they only held him for 8 hours before he completely confessed to everything, and I guess he talked about his crimes for like 2 days straight. And the cops were just like, okay, thanks, but bye. So by April of 2000, he was sentenced to 13 life terms plus 20 years for the attempted murder of the sex worker that luckily survived, and he is not going to be eligible for parole. He actually died in December 2020 from COVID-19 while he was in prison in Italy. So that is the story of Donato Valencia. I know I'm not saying that right. I'm so sorry. Sorry to all the Italians out there. You can roast me in the comments. Okay, next up we have Charles Ray Hatcher, and I'm just gonna get this out there. There is, in my mind, a connection with people who go by 3 names and serial killers. Like, if you meet somebody and they go by like their 3 names, I'm just saying. But anyways, this is the story of Charles Ray Hatcher. Charles Ray Hatcher was born July 16th, 1929 in Mound City, Missouri. His father was an ex-convict. He was known to be an abusive alcoholic. Hatcher was actually bullied as a child and would then go on to bully other children because of it. When he was 6, he was flying kites with his older brother Arthur, and from what I can tell, they were like sharing a kite, and then when Arthur took the kite, he like got hit by lightning and died. And this was when Charles Ray Hatcher was only 6, so like that's extremely traumatizing. He started committing crimes when he was 18 and was charged with 2 counts of auto theft, and he served half of his sentence for that, but was released from prison. But then he was sent back to prison a few months later for writing a bad check at a gas station. After that stint, he escaped from prison in 1951, and then he attempted a burglary, but then he was caught and sentenced to 2 more years. So when he got done with that sentence, he stole another car and was sentenced to 4 years for that. Then he tried to escape from prison again and got 2 more years added onto his sentence. This guy's crazy. Like, he has never, since he was a young adult, has never not committed crimes. It's crazy. So by 1959, he was only 30 years old, and he was finally released from his 6th prison sentence. At 30, that's so crazy to me. 2 months later, from his 6th prison sentence, he tried to abduct a 16-year-old newspaper delivery boy. 2 months. Couldn't make it more than 2 months without committing a crime. Obviously, the boy reported him to the police, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for that. 1961, so he's in prison, he was sentenced to solitary confinement for murdering an inmate named Jerry. Just murdered Jerry. However, he wasn't actually convicted of the murder. He was just sentenced to solitary confinement, where they couldn't prove that he did the murder, so he couldn't be convicted of it, so he just got sent to solitary. And then he was released from prison 2 years later, because they couldn't prove that he killed Jerry. So anyways, he's out and about. He started using fake names, moved to California. In 1969, he strangled a 12-year-old boy to death in California. 2 days later, he abducted and sexually assaulted a 6-year-old boy in San Francisco. He was arrested for this and sentenced to psychological evaluation, finally. Psychologists, after evaluating him, thought that he was like really exaggerating his symptoms and that he wasn't really as mentally ill as he was saying he was. And they thought he was just trying to avoid prison by saying that he was mentally ill. However, 1971, he was found unfit to stand trial, although the psychologist said that he was making up his symptoms, so I don't know how they came to that conclusion. He was being kept in the mental hospital, and then he escaped from the mental hospital. But then he was caught a week later because he was stealing a car in California, so obviously time can't go by without him committing crimes. So he was sent back to the mental hospital for another evaluation, because obviously there's something wrong with this guy. And he was found to be a danger to himself and others, which I think is clear. And it's unfortunate that no conclusions have been made about his mental health from what I could read. You know, he's making these claims, but nobody believes him. So I don't know. Obviously, mental health has a factor in this, but it's just not being addressed properly, which is extremely unfortunate. Anyways, so he was sent to a prison hospital after that because he was a danger to himself and other patients. So he was sent to a prison hospital, which is, I guess, more like a maximum security hospital? Prison? I don't know how that works. He tried to escape a year later from this prison hospital. So he was sent back to court for this, and obviously it was determined that he was still a threat to society. A couple months later, he actually attempted suicide while in the prison hospital in California and was diagnosed officially with paranoid schizophrenia. However, this story's crazy. I swear, we're starting off wild with the cancers. So 1975, this was like literally, okay, so 1973, he's trying to escape from the mental hospital and gets diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after committing all these crimes every chance he gets for his whole life. And then 1975, they're like, oh, you know, he has good behavior, he can go. What? Are you kidding me? 2 years ago, he was a threat to society. I don't understand this. Okay, anyways, so he was paroled in 1977 and he was sent to a halfway house. So like, he's still being monitored. However, this is gonna make you mad. I'm just warning you. This is gonna make you mad. 1978, a year after, not even a year after he's sent to the halfway house, the body of a 4-year-old boy was found in the St. Joseph River in Missouri. He had been sexually abused, he had been suffocated, and police questioned like 100 people in this crime. And this other guy named Melvin actually like admitted to the murders, and it turns out he was coerced by police. He had been questioned for like days about it and eventually just confessed because they broke him down. And then Hatcher later would confess to this crime after he was arrested for obviously a lot of other crimes. I don't know how he ended up back in Missouri. I don't know. 1978, that same year, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old boy, and he was sent to another mental hospital for that and then released 4 days later. Are we just not keeping like record? I mean, he was using a lot of fake names, wasn't he? Maybe that's why, but like, it's just so frustrating. Okay, anyways, 4 months after his release, he was arrested for the assault and attempted murder of a 7-year-old boy. He was sent to another hospital, but the charges were dropped. So he was released in 1980. 2 years later. Oh. These are children. Okay, sorry, I'm getting really mad. 2 months after the release in 1980, 2 months, lucky number, I guess, 2 years, 2 months, it's just over and over. Okay. 2 months later, he was arrested for another assault, but escaped. 2 months after that, I'm telling you, 2. This is his lucky number. I don't know. And it's now September of 1980, and all of this has happened. A month later, he was arrested in Lincoln, Nebraska. We're in Lincoln now. Welcome to Lincoln. He was arrested for the attempted assault and sodomy of a 17-year-old boy, a child. And then he was sent to another mental facility. Why? Why is he getting sent to mental facilities? I understand that he has a mental disorder, but like, he's committing violent crime. Anyway, he was literally released after 21 days. 21 days. He's assaulted like 15 children. Okay, so now it's January 1981. He was arrested after a knife fighting with a knife. But by April of that year, 4 months later, he was released from a mental hospital. Again. Guys, this case is so frustrating. July 1982. So we went a little bit. This little girl, an 11-year-old girl, goes missing in St. Joe, Missouri. Her body was found the next day along the river, the Missouri River, and she had been beaten and strangled to death. Hatcher was arrested the next day trying to check into a hospital. He was trying to check himself in this time. So at this point, he starts confessing to his crimes. He confessed to 15 other murders before 1969. He confessed to the murder of the 11-year-old girl, and he was given the death sentence for the murder of the 4-year-old boy that had been attributed to that Melvin guy back in 1978. He requested a death sentence. He didn't receive the death sentence. He was requesting the death sentence, but it was denied. And then he ended up committing suicide in his cell 4 days later at the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri in the year 1984. He was 55 years old at the time of his death. That is a wild one, and I don't know if it was because it was the 70s and there was just no way to keep track of his previous crimes, like if they just didn't know or if they knew and they were just like, whatever, I don't know. I feel like a lot of that could have been avoided. So that one's like really frustrating to me, especially because it dealt with a lot of like really young children. So anyways, we're moving on to the next guy. His name is Julio Perez Silva. Julio was born July 15th, 1963 in, I'm gonna try to say it, okay? I'm not scared, but I'm not gonna say it right. I'm telling you that right now. He was born in Puchuncavi, Valparaiso, Chile. How did I do? Anybody from Chile want to tell me how I did? Chile? I don't know. I tried. So he was known as the psychopath from Alto Hospicio. Alto Hospicio. Trying. He actually had a very consistent MO. He was a taxi driver. He would pick up young women, offer them a free ride, and then he would take them to a really remote location, sexually assault them, murder them by shooting them in the head with a gun. And then he would dispose of their bodies in abandoned mines. He was actually convicted of killing 14 women this way. He was sentenced to life in prison in February of 2004. He is currently 57 and serving out his sentence at the Colina prison in Santiago, Chile. Okay, our next Cancer is Gerald Gallego. He was born July 19th, 1946 in Sacramento, California. He actually was a part of a murdering couple. So him and his wife, her name is Charlene, would murder 10 people. Their ages ranged from 13 to 22, so pretty young. And they would actually keep these people as sex slaves before murdering them. Sorry, I can't even say that without like bile raising my throat. Charlene would actually testify against Gerald and was therefore only sentenced to 16 years. This really reminds me of the Ken and Barbie killers. I talked about Carla Homolka in the Taurus episode, the previous episode. Just not, well, I just hate it. So Charlene was sentenced to 16 years and she was released in 1997, and Gerald was found guilty and was sentenced to death in 1983. But he actually died in 2002 of cancer while awaiting his execution. I just can't believe that Charlene is just like oot and a boot. Like ugh. Anyways, next up, Rudolph Pliel. These are hard ones. Rudolph was born July 7th, 1924 in Czechoslovakia. He was known as the Dead Maker, which is horrifying. His father was actually a communist, and after the Nazis seized Czechoslovakia, so he was arrested for being a communist, and they had to move away, still in Czechoslovakia. But since his father was arrested, Rudolph had to start making money for the family at age 9. He ended up finding employment by border smuggling and was actually arrested many times, and this was all happening when he was very, very young, 9 years old. That's so young. He obviously didn't really attend school super regularly. He was like smuggling stuff. I don't know what he was smuggling, but he was smuggling something. But by age 13, he started experimenting with prostitutes. 13, oh my God. He ended up leaving his home when he was 15. He started working as a butcher, and then he quit his job to like work on a barge, and then he had like other weird jobs. But I guess he had really bad epilepsy, so it was really hard for him to hold down a job because of that. So he ended up in Germany, and that's where he would end up committing his murders. He started out helping people illegally cross the border from East to West Germany. When he was 22, so between the years 1946 and 1947, he would sexually assault and murder 12 women. He actually had 2 accomplices, Carl, aged 34, and Conrad, aged 18. During his trial, Rudolph was claiming that he had mental illness. The prosecutors just figured that it was him just trying to be hospitalized instead of in prison. All 3 of the men were sentenced to prison in 1950 for a life sentence. Rudolph actually hanged himself in his cell in 1958. Carl died in prison in 1976. And Conrad, since he was so young at the time, I'm assuming, he was actually pardoned in the late 70s and released on parole. Okay, next is the story of Sean Vincent Gillis, another 3-namer. Sean was born June 24th, 1962 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He was known, this is so sad. It's not sad, it's funny. He was known as the other Baton Rouge serial killer. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the other one? Not the first one, the other one. That's so lame. He's so lame. As a child, he was pretty average grades, just like boring. However, he started being violent and has started his rap sheet in the 80s when he was 17. He was arrested for little things like traffic violations, DUIs, marijuana possession, and just contempt of court, little things. But his rap sheet started pretty young, and he would actually commit his first murder pretty young. He was 22 in the year 1994. When asked why he was murdering people, he said it was because he was stressed. Yeah, we all murder when we're stressed. His first murder was actually an 81-year-old woman living in a retirement home. He would break into her home. He originally just wanted to sexually assault her, but when she screamed, he slit her throat and then decided to stab her 50 times. 50 times. 50 times. That is so many times to stab a person. Ugh. 1999, he started becoming obsessed with a woman he'd seen jogging in the area and started driving around trying to find her jogging again. Eventually he found her. She was jogging early on a Sunday morning. Her name is Hardy Schmidt. She was 52 years old. She was his third murder. So he ended up confessing later that he hit her with his car, put her in the car, drove her somewhere, sexually assaulted her, killed her, put her in the trunk, and then dumped her body 2 days later. He would go on to kill 8 women over the next 5 years, and he would frequently keep their body parts as souvenirs. So Derek Todd Lee, another 3-namer, is known as the Baton Rouge serial killer, and the reason that they had like these similar nicknames is because they were actually committing their crimes in the same area at the same time with 3 names. I'm just saying there's a pattern. There's a pattern here. So Derek Todd Lee ended up getting a lot more attention than Sean Vincent Gillis. So it took a little more time for crimes to be attributed to Gillis versus Derek Todd Lee. It was confusing. And then they made it more confusing by giving them basically the same name. However, Gillis was arrested in 2004, a year after Derek Todd Lee was arrested. Gillis went to trial in 2008, and he was sentenced to life in prison. He is 58 years old and serving out his sentence at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Next, we have Daniel Joseph Blank. He was born June 28th, 1962 in St. James Parish, Louisiana. That's 3 in a row from Louisiana. Well, Derek Todd Lee isn't a Cancer, but yeah, I'm just saying. He killed 6 people between 1996 and 1997, which is still a lot of people to kill in a year, in my opinion. Well, any number of people to kill ever is too many, but you know what I mean. He was only charged for the murder of 3 of them in 1997, and this was when he was only 35. 35. Oh my God. It was determined that he actually had a really low IQ. He only went to school for like 8 years, and they believed he was unable to like conceptualize abstract concepts, which is, I think, difficult for a neurotypical person, because difficult to conceptualize how somebody wouldn't be able to, well, okay, maybe this is just me, but it's difficult to conceptualize how somebody wouldn't be able to conceptualize. You know what I mean? He did have 4 children though with his girlfriend, and they were all living together with his kids while he was murdering people. He would rob people in their homes and murder them in their homes, and investigators actually believe that he was fueled by his gambling addiction, which this is a common theme too. Gambling addiction and murder. I wouldn't say common, but I mean, there was one other one, wasn't there? At least one. He was sentenced to death in 1999, but this was commuted to a life sentence without the possibility of parole in 2001. Next, we have an oldie. This is a woman named Anna Marie Hahn. She was born July 7th, 1906 in Bavaria, Germany. She was actually born to a well-off family. Her father was a furniture maker. She actually became pregnant with her first son, Oscar, but could never produce a father figure. So her family actually sent her to the US because they were so embarrassed by this, but they kept Oscar, which seems odd. So she had to leave her son behind and go to the US because her parents were embarrassed of her having a child out of wedlock. So she went to stay with relatives in Cincinnati. She met a fellow German immigrant named Philip Hahn, who she ended up marrying in 1930. Philip went back to Germany to bring Oscar back with him so that they could live together as a family, which is like super nice. Love Philip. So Anna's tactic was to rob elderly men, which I'm all about it. I'm all about it. Like, get your money, honey. She would take care of them and like get them to write her into their will or leave their inheritance to her. But it turns out that she was robbing these men to support her gambling habit. She befriended an old man named Ernest Kohler, who died shortly after their friendship, and he left her his house in his will. Interesting. And people think that Ernest is actually her first victim. And then she would just continue to care for like elderly men, convince them to loan her money, and then they would just promptly mysteriously die. Jacob Wagner, for example, he was 78 when he died in 1937 and left Anna like $17,000 cash, and the cash was made to his beloved niece, which she was not. 67-year-old George Zellman, I don't know how to say that. He also left her exactly $17,000 when he died in 1937. And her last victim, her last known victim, was George Obendorfer. I don't know. His death was very suspicious because they found high levels of arsenic in his body. So it turns out she liked to use poison. Anna denied knowing Obendorfer, but her son was like, hey, actually we like totally went on vacation with him. Oscar, this is Oscar, and he testified that they had all been together and traveled together from Ohio to Colorado at one point. Anna's 2 previous clients were exhumed, and it was found that they also had levels of arsenic in their system. So she was convicted of the murders in November of 1937. She was arrested and sentenced to death by electric chair in the Ohio State Penitentiary in December of 1938 when she was only 32 years old. Next, we have another German lady, Elisabeth Weiss. Weiss? I know that W's are V's. That is where my knowledge of German ends. She was born July 1st, 1853 in Billhausen, Germany. Was that a good accent? Was it? It might have been. I think it was good. She was actually a midwife. Yep. You know what's coming. She was originally convicted of carrying out illegal abortions. I don't know if this means that she was doing abortions on women that didn't want abortions, or if she was just giving women that wanted abortions. How many times can I say abortion in one sentence? I don't know which one it was. I don't know the story. But she was married with a child. When she got in trouble for carrying out these illegal abortions, money kind of got tight. And she actually tried murdering her husband by poisoning him. She tried murdering her husband 2 times. First with poisoning his food, and second she tried to slit his throat in his sleep. I don't know if this was because of the money problems or because of the like marital issues or both. She was unsuccessful in murdering him and was actually sent to prison instead. When she got out of prison, she somehow got a job in childcare. Odd. And mostly she was doing childcare for women who were unable to raise their own children or who had illegitimate children, which I just hate that term. I think all children are legitimate, but whatever. So she would charge a fee for taking care of the kids, and then she would put the kids up for adoption. Instead of giving the money to the adoptive parents, she kept the money, so then the adoptive parents would return the kid and she would kill the kid. I don't know why. I tried to find this out, and I don't know if this is just how things were done back then, but I couldn't figure out why she was paying the adoptive parents. I still can't figure it out. I've researched it. I don't know why. I don't know how things worked back then. Don't the adoptive parents normally pay for the kids? You know what I mean? I don't know. Anyways, if the adoptive parents returned the kids, she would kill the kids. She would either poison them or give them morphine so they would stop breathing, and then she would burn them in her stove at her house, which is horrifying. But she would tell the mothers of these kids that the biological mother, that they were adopted by these wealthy families and that they were just living life. Police started growing suspicious of her little gig, so she had to bail. And that's when she started forcing her own daughter, Paula, into prostitution, which is yucky. Paula got pregnant though, and she gave birth to a baby that Elizabeth immediately drowned and burned. Ugh. Don't like that. Police started investigating her and found her stash of morphine and poison, and started calling her the Angel Maker of St. Paul. She was convicted of murdering 4 children in 1904 and was executed by guillotine in 1905, which I did not know they were still using guillotines in the 1900s, but whatever. And she was only 51 at the time. Next we have Carl Panzram. This guy, wild ride, I will tell you right now. We're not going to get into it though, and I'll tell you why. So he was born June 28th, 1891 in Grand Forks, Minnesota. That's not how they talk there. I'm sorry, I just felt like saying it that way. He claims to have committed 21 murders, and a huge long list of robberies and sexual assaults and burglaries and everything. And he has this really long book that he wrote, an autobiography, when he was in prison. It's insane. He has a really long, crazy life of just horrible abuse and imprisonment. It's insane. This story is very long. I'm not going to tell it today. This would be a multi-part video on its own. So instead, I recommend you listen to the Morbid podcast episodes on Carl Panzram. They did an excellent job, and it's a crazy story. So if you are interested in knowing more about Carl, go listen to Morbid podcast. Okay, next we have Heinrich Pomeranke. Pomerank. I don't know how to say it. He was also born in Germany, July 6th, 1937. When he was in school, when he was still school-aged, he would commit his first series of sexual assaults and then start his murder spree in 1959. He claimed that it was a film that caused him to murder. The film was called The 10 Commandments, and it made him decide that women were the root of all evil and needed to die. He would kill his first woman that very night. She was a 49-year-old woman, and he murdered her in the parking lot of the cinema. He liked to sexually assault them as well, and he slit her throat. Ugh, sorry, that's bad. Ugh, I hate that. Okay, 1960, he killed 4 women. He attempted to kill 7 more, sexually assaulted 2, and attempted to sexually assault 25 more. He committed 6 burglaries, 10 robberies, and 6 thefts. Here is my question. What is the difference between a robbery, a burglary, and a theft? Wikipedia always puts them as different things, and I don't know what the difference is. Did I research that? No, I did not. But it's weird. Anyways, lots of crime. He would remain in prison until his death in 2008. So from 1960 to 2008. And then he would die of leukemia at age 71. At the time of his death, he was the longest serving prisoner in Germany ever until the time of his death. However, he has been surpassed by Hans Georg Neumann in Germany, who is currently serving a life sentence of 59 years, and he is currently 83 years old. But at the time of his death, Heinrich was the longest serving German prisoner. Next, Donald Leroy Evans, born July 5th, 1957 in Michigan. He was convicted of 3 murders. His first crime was in 1986. He sexually assaulted a woman in Galveston, Texas. She was only 29 years old. And he was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but for some reason only served 5. So annoyed. August 1991, he sexually assaulted, kidnapped, and murdered a 10-year-old girl. Ugh, it hurts my heart to say these things. This crime would actually earn him the death penalty. He actually escaped jail in 1983, but he was captured, and he was found hiding in a dumpster, which I think is so funny because that's literally where he belongs. But while he was in custody, he claimed responsibility for 70 other people in 22 different states at different public parks and rest stops. And by responsibility of 70 other people, I'm talking about 70 other murders. And at first they were there's no way, but actually he ended up giving details on a couple of unsolved crimes in Florida that matched up with what happened. So who knows? Those cases in Florida took place in 1985 and involved the murder of 2 38-year-old women in Florida. He was eventually tried and convicted of these crimes in 1995 after his confession. In 1999, he was actually stabbed to death by a fellow inmate at the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Mississippi, obviously, when he was 41. Okay, next we have Wesley Allen Dodd, born July 3rd, 1961 in Toppenish, Washington. God, these names are weird. Again, I'm not saying everybody has, a lot of people have 3 names. I have 3 names. But if you go by your 3 names, and I don't know if these people did, it's just their Wikipedia article says it. Maybe it's just to differentiate them from other Wesley Dodds. I don't know, but I'm just saying. Anyways, he was born in Washington, July 3rd, 1961. He was convicted of sexually assaulting and murdering 3 little boys in Vancouver. I hate this one. This guy. Okay, I really went into depth on this guy initially, but it's just not okay. I don't want to talk about it. It involves children, and I've already talked too much about children in this video. Anyways, long story short, his crime involved the sexual assault of 50 different children, all under the age of 12, mostly boys. And he was sentenced to death by hanging in Washington in 1999 at age 31. I'm sorry, not 1999, 1993, and he was only 31, so he did a lot. This case is also very frustrating. He's getting slaps on the wrist dozens of times, kind of like the first guy I talked about. It's just horrible and awful, and I hate him, and I don't want to go into it. Next, we have some Australians. We got 2 of them. That was horrible. Just don't, Hannah, stop it. We have Bandali Debs. He was born July 18th, 1963 in Victoria, Australia. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences plus 27 years for the murder of 2 police officers in 1998, and then the murder of a teenage girl in 1997, as well as the murder of a sex worker in 1995. And he is currently serving out his life sentence in Australia, and he is 67 years old. That's that on that. Peter Dupas is my next one. Born July 6, 1953 in Sydney, Australia. He is convicted of 3 murders and is the prime suspect in 3 other murders in Melbourne, and these murders happened between like the 1980s and the 1990s. He has a really long history of sexual assault and other crimes, violent crimes, but his main MO is removing the breasts of his victims, which is like a whole thing. It's a whole thing. He is currently serving out his 3 life sentences in Australia, and as of this video, he is 67 years old. Next, we have Tommy Lynn Sells, born June 28th, 1964 in Oakland, California. He received the death penalty for just 1 murder, but he was actually suspected of 21 others. He claimed that at the age of 8, he was molested by a man that was living with them, and it was consented to by his mother. And he said that these experiences heavily impacted his crimes. Between 1978 and 1999, starting at when he was 14 years old in 1978, he would start train hopping across the United States, drinking heavily, doing drugs, and started committing crimes that would lead to several arrests along the way. He was imprisoned for truck theft in 1990, and at that time he was diagnosed with antisocial, borderline, and schizoid personality disorders. And if you're interested in what that means, if you're not familiar with personality disorders, I do have an entire episode on personality disorders on my podcast Fluff Stuff. I will link it in the description box below, or you can find us on Spotify. He also was found to have substance abuse disorder, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder, as well as psychosis. That's a lot of diagnoses. I don't want to be rude, but like, how can you function? Anyways, and obviously on top of this, he was drinking and doing drugs. So I don't know, he obviously needed help. But in December of 1999, he sexually assaulted, stabbed, and killed a 13-year-old girl in Texas. And then he slit the throat of another little girl named Crystal. She was 10. Crystal actually survived, and she was able to give police a sketch and lead to his capture. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection and died on April 3rd, 2014 at the age of 49 at the Texas State Penitentiary. Next, we have John Bitrolf. Born July 1st, 1966 in New York, New York. He was convicted of 2 murders, but he is suspected to be the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. LISK is known for 10 to 16 murders in Long Island between 1996 and 2010, but as far as like this video, he is not officially identified, but John Bitrolf is suspected to be LISK, or one of the suspects. Bitrolf is currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences for his murders, and is currently 54 years old and serving his time at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York. Next is Glenn Edward Rogers, born July 15th, 1962 in Hamilton, Ohio. He is known as the cross-country killer, or the Casanova killer. He was expelled from school before he was 16. He impregnated a 14-year-old girl shortly after. They actually got married and had another child in 1981, and then his wife divorced him 2 years later, and she alleged very brutal physical abuse from Rogers. He is convicted of 2 murders, but he is suspected to have killed more, and after his arrest, he claims he killed like 70, but then he recanted that statement and said it was a joke. It's not funny. Not a good joke. He is also a possible suspect in the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, aka O.J. Simpson's wife? Girlfriend? Were they married? I don't know. So he's a suspect in the murder of Nicole Brown. I don't have any more details on that, so if you're looking for that, I'm sorry. Next, we have Janine Jones, born July 13th, 1950 in Texas. She is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 children while she was working as a nurse in Bexar County Hospital in Texas. This one makes me mad. So she was working in the pediatric intensive care unit at this hospital in Texas, Bexar County Hospital, and she also worked at another clinic in Kerrville, Texas in the 70s and 80s. We actually don't really know how many children died in her care while she was at Bexar. However, it was noted that it was a statistically improbable number of children that died in her care. However, the reason we don't know how many died while they were in her care is because Bexar destroyed all of the records of her activities while she was working there in order to avoid litigation. Which sounds like it should cause more litigation, but whatever, I don't make the rules. However, when she was working at Kerrville in Texas, she was charged with poisoning 6 children. It turns out that she was injecting them with a paralytic, which normally if you do that to someone, they have to be like on a breathing system so that they can keep breathing, but she didn't obviously help them breathe, so they just died. And she claimed that her reasons for poisoning these children was so that there would be a need for an intensive care unit at the Kerrville hospital she was working at. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison in 1985 for the death of a 15-month-old girl, and concurrent terms of 60 years for the attempted murder of another child in her care while she was a nurse. She was scheduled for mandatory release in 2018 due to overcrowding. However, to combat this, they charged her with the murder of an 11-month-old boy in 2017 in order to avoid her release. So she's currently serving her life sentence, and she's eligible for parole when she's 87, and she is currently, as of this video, 70 years old. So hopefully she doesn't get parole, because that's scary. But thank God she got indicted for that other sentence, because we don't want her oot in the boot. No, we do not. Those are the cancer serial killers that I have to talk about today. That was not an exhaustive list of all 32. Those are just some of them. If I did all 32, this video would take forever. Again, I'm going to be doing like a collection of all the data and stuff in a video at the end of this series, so I hope you subscribe and stick around to watch my other videos about serial killers by their zodiac sign, and then we can do a big reveal of data at the end, because I love me some data. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.